Imagine you're just scrolling through your feed right now. You stop on this like 30-second viral video of a massive political protest.
Right.
And they're shouting, there are barricades, maybe a crash with police. And the caption tells you exactly who the good guys are and exactly who the bad guys are.
Totally. It spells it all out for you.
Exactly. And in that fraction of a second, your brain just locks in an opinion. You react. But what if the very language you use in your own head to describe that video is like fundamentally altering your grip on reality?
It's a huge question.
Right. What if this tiny, almost invisible conversational habit is the difference between being a critical thinker and being completely manipulated?
Yeah, it happens every single time we open an app or turn on the news, honestly. We process these tiny fragments of information and immediately treat them like absolute undisputed facts.
Yeah, like it's the whole truth.
Exactly. But the moment we start trying to communicate human experience, especially in a digital age, we aren't dealing with objective reality anymore. I mean, we are dealing strictly with perception. We're essentially operating in the realm of, it seems like.
Well, welcome to the learner listening right now to another deep dive. Today, we are exploring this really treacherous but fascinating gap between perception and reality.
It's a fun one.
It really is. And we're pulling from an incredible mix of material today to understand this. On one hand, we're unpacking the mechanics of spoken English.
Which I love.
Right. Specifically, we're looking at how we use the phrase as though to frame the world around us. And then on the other hand, we're looking at the anatomy of a massive politically charged debate happening in India involving the CJP, which is Citizens for Justice and Peace, and the ruling BJP.
And, you might be wondering right now, how an English grammar concept connects to national political protests.
Yeah, it seems like a stretch at first.
It does. But the connection is entirely about framing. The way we structure a sentence to describe a hypothetical situation, it actually operates on the exact same psychological hardware we use to consume and debate national politics.
That is so crazy to think about.
It is. And just to be perfectly clear up front, we aren't here to take political sides today.
No.
Our goal is to impartially break down the mechanics of language and, the architecture of democratic disagreement so you can navigate this polarized world just a bit more clearly.
So let's start with the language side of the equation, because I think it gives us the perfect lens to view everything else.
Let's do it.
The core concept here is the phrase, as though. In everyday conversation, as though simply means it seems like, or it looks like, or just as if.
Right.
We use it constantly to compare something happening right in front of us to an imaginary or unverified situation. It's basically a way of interpreting reality when we don't have all the facts.
Exactly. It's a tool for estimation.
Yeah.
And the way we use it actually changes depending on whether we think a situation is possible or if we know for a fact that it's an illusion.
Okay, so let's break that down.
Sure. So let's look at how we use it to describe the present reality first, like how things appear right now. The structure is basically the subject plus looks or seems plus as though, and then the subject and the verb. So if you say, she looks as though she is tired.
You are stating an observation based on visual cues.
Right, exactly.
You haven't run a blood test, you haven't checked her sleep app or whatever. You're just looking at the bags under her eyes and making a judgment. You're saying, it seems she is tired.
Spot on.
Yeah.
Or if you say, he talks as though he knows everything. You aren't actually confirming his IQ, right?
Definitely not.
You are describing the confidence or maybe the arrogance of his delivery. He speaks like he has all the facts.
Yeah. It's about reading the environment, I guess. If you walk outside and say, it sounds as though it's going to rain, you're synthesizing sensory inputs.
Dark clouds, thunder, the drop in temperature.
Exactly. And you're predicting an outcome based on that. But you also see this used when someone is actively masking their reality, which is super interesting. Think about the phrase, she smiled as though nothing had happened.
Oh, that's such a powerful usage.
Right. Because in that scenario, something definitely did happen. The tension is in the room. But she is projecting this outward appearance of normalcy. Okay, let's unpack this for a second. Using as though in the present tense is basically like putting a social media filter on reality.
I like that analogy.
Yeah, you aren't stating a hard, verified fact. You're describing the vibe, essentially. You are admitting, just by using those two words, that this is an interpretation.
The filter analogy works perfectly because it really highlights the subjectivity built into the language. You're telling the listener, hey, this is just my perception of the present moment.
Right.
But language is incredibly adaptable. And it shifts gears entirely when we want to describe something that is definitively factually untrue.
Okay, so what happens when we know the filter is entirely fake?
This is where the mechanics get wild. If we are describing an unreal or imaginary situation, something we know is absolutely false, we actually start using the past tense after, as though.
Wait, really? Even if the action is happening right now, in the present moment?
Yes. The English language creates this psychological boundary here. The formula is subject-verb as though, subject, and then the past tense.
Oh, wow.
By using the past tense for a present action, you are signaling to the listener's subconscious, hey, this is a hypothetical. Do not take this as reality.
Okay, give me an example.
Take the sentence. He spends money as though he were rich.
Oh, I see. The reality being he is definitely not rich. He might be like maxing out his credit cards, but the wealth is an illusion.
Exactly. Notice how we use were there.
Yeah, were rich. Or I guess you might say she speaks English as though she were an American when she's actually from completely outside the US. The accent is just really convincing.
Right. Or you might be observing some colleagues and say, they behave as though they own the company.
But they don't own it.
Nope. They are employees just like everyone else, but their attitude projects this false reality. Or another one, he acts as though he knew the answer.
When he definitely doesn't know it.
Exactly.
I love how the past tense, using were, owned, knew, it flags the unreality of the situation. It's like a structural warning label built right into the sentence.
That's a great way to put it.
And applying this to how we consume modern political media, I think, is incredibly revealing. Because on social media, we are constantly bombarded with these unreal scenarios, but the platforms rarely give us that psychological warning label.
The lack of that warning label is arguably one of the biggest challenges in modern democracy, honestly.
Yeah.
A 30-second clip of a protest or a politician's speech just drops into your feed. The algorithm, the caption, the dramatic music, it all presents that fragment of video as though it tells the entire undisputed story of a complex event.
It's so true. You see a clip of a clash at a protest, and the overlay text tells you exactly how outraged you should be. The platform presents it as though it is the absolute truth.
Right.
And we, as consumers, react as though we were fully informed experts on the situation, even if we, literally only started thinking about the issue 10 seconds ago.
Which brings us directly to the real-world application we're examining today, the controversies surrounding protests in India. Specifically those involving the CJP and the BJP.
Right. Let's get into this.
Before anyone can even begin to have a productive debate about these events, we have to recognize how often context is stripped away. We really have to ask ourselves, is this the full video? Is this information actually verified?
Because if we don't...
Because when we fail to ask those questions, we treat curated snippets of information as though they are the entire reality.
So let's take those differing perceptions and drop them into a massive functioning democracy. I mean, India is the world's largest democracy, which means the scale of these debates is just staggering.
Unimaginable, yeah.
We're going to neutrally lay out the arguments surrounding these protests. Let's put our own filters aside for a minute and act as though we are purely impartial observers, weighing the facts, analyzing the anatomy of this disagreement.
I think the first thing to understand is why these specific protests command so much national attention.
Good point. Why do they?
Whenever a massive political apparatus like the ruling BJP is involved, or a highly visible organization like the CJP, which focuses on justice and peace initiatives, the stakes instantly skyrocket.
It's no longer just a local dispute then.
Exactly. It becomes a proxy battle for the soul of the country's democratic values. Every action is heavily scrutinized, and every narrative is amplified.
Okay, let's break down the protest perspective first, which aligns with organizations like the CJP. The foundational argument here, as I understand it, is that protests are a non-negotiable democratic right.
Yes.
In a country of over 1 billion people, formalized political channels can be really slow or, frankly, just inaccessible to marginalized groups.
For supporters, protests are basically the pressure valve of a free society. They argue that without the ability to gather and publicly dissent, ordinary citizens wouldn't have a reliable mechanism to force those in power to actually listen.
Right. It's about giving a voice to the voiceless.
Exactly.
And groups like the CJP are viewed by their supporters as playing a crucial role in that ecosystem. They are seen as necessary watchdogs, basically bringing legal and human rights issues to the forefront that the political establishment might otherwise, prefer to ignore or sweep under the rug.
But then you have the critics, right? The pro-BJP perspective. and they look at the exact same physical events and perceive a completely different reality.
Okay, what do they see?
Well, the argument from the government's defenders isn't an attack on the concept of democracy itself. It's a critique of how these specific protests are executed and the underlying motives driving them.
Right. Critics strongly argue that while protest is a right, it comes with the responsibility to remain peaceful. You can't just disrupt daily public life, block major arteries of commerce, or use a gathering as a vehicle to spread unverified misinformation.
Yeah, there is a deep fundamental concern for maintaining public order.
Which makes sense.
Furthermore, critics frequently question the timing and the selective outrage of organizations like the CJP. The counter-narrative suggests that these aren't always organic, objective human rights campaigns, but rather politically influenced maneuvers.
Designed to destabilize the elected government, essentially.
Exactly.
And from the government's standpoint, BJP supporters argue that the administration is operating entirely within the bounds of the law and the Constitution. So therefore, any massive public resistance needs to be based on hard, verified, legal facts, not just, emotional assumptions whipped up by organizers or 30-second viral clips on social media.
You can see how perfectly the as though filter applies here, right?
Oh, totally.
The two sides are rarely disagreeing on the physical facts of the event. A road is blocked, people are marching.
Right, the event happened.
But supporters look at that blocked road as though it is a noble, necessary stand for human rights. Meanwhile, critics look at the exact same blocked road as though it is a cynical, politically motivated disruption of public order.
So what does this all mean? I mean, is the disagreement really about the protest itself, or is it the political message behind it?
It's often both. And it feels like the great mistake we make in these modern political debates is treating every single disagreement as a cinematic battle between absolute heroes and absolute villains.
Yeah, we want the world to be binary.
Because binary is easy.
True.
It requires no cognitive effort. But real-world issues, especially in a massive democracy, are infinitely complex. Understanding them requires patience, nuance, and really the willingness to see validity in competing concerns.
You have to balance the absolute necessity of human rights with the absolute necessity of public order.
Exactly. And social media algorithms are simply not designed to encourage that kind of patient, nuanced thinking. They are designed to trigger immediate outrage.
So, depending on the political lens you wear, your reality is completely altered, which leads to the big question, I guess. How do we actually heal these divides? If our perception is so easily warped by the present filter, how do we establish a shared reality?
Well, to figure out how to move forward, we actually have to look at how we process the past.
Okay, how so?
Linguistically, that brings us to the final, most complex structure of our as-though grammar rules. How do we talk about the past when perception is involved?
I'm intrigued.
When we want to describe how a past situation seemed to be, or how someone acted based on an unreal past event, we use a very specific phrasing. We use the subject plus the verb plus as though plus the subject again, followed by had and the past participle.
Okay, had plus the past participle. Let's ground that with some everyday examples so we can hear it.
Sure. Imagine you see a friend and say, "She looked as though she had cried all night." The looking happened in the past.
Right.
And it appeared as if an even earlier action, crying all night, had occurred. Or, think about a social slight. He acted as though he had never met me.
Oh, which is the worst feeling. You run into someone at an event, you've spent hours talking to them before, and they just give you a blank stare.
Yep. They are acting based on a past reality that is completely untrue.
That's a great example. Or for a positive spin, maybe something like they celebrated as though they had won the lottery.
Exactly. They definitely didn't win the lottery, but their past celebration carried all the intense, euphoric energy of that unreal event.
Wow. Applying this structure to society, and specifically to these heated, polarized political debates, is incredibly eye-opening. Think about how people interact in the comment section of any political post right now.
Oh, it's brutal.
People furiously type away, destroying relationships with their neighbors, arguing as though they had already verified all the facts.
That is the crux of the issue right there. People speak with aggressive, absolute certainty about legislation they haven't read or events they haven't properly researched. They argue as though they had watched the unedited 2-hour footage when all they've seen is a highly edited, heavily biased highlight reel. They debate as though they had a degree in constitutional law, simply because they read a single opinion piece.
It's wild. We project this false past reality where we did the hard work of verifying the truth, when in reality we just reacted to a headline that confirmed our pre-existing biases.
Exactly.
So how do we break that cycle? How do we fix this democratic disconnect based on the sources we're looking at?
The synthesis of these ideas points toward a very clear, though definitely difficult, solution. A healthy, functioning democracy requires two things to exist simultaneously: deep accountability and responsible governance.
It's not a choice between the two.
No, you need activists holding leaders accountable, and you need leaders maintaining order and executing laws responsibly.
And as individual citizens, our participation in that system requires a massive shift in how we process information. Democracy works best when people commit to doing three specific things: asking questions respectfully, actively taking the time to verify information, and perhaps most importantly, remaining genuinely open to different viewpoints.
Remaining open is the hardest part, I think, because it requires humility.
Yeah, it really does.
It means acknowledging that your initial emotional reaction to a news story might just be an as-though situation. It might just be an appearance, a filter, not an absolute objective fact.
That's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people.
It is. Disagreement is the engine of democracy, but disagreement doesn't have to become disrespect. Real, nuanced, patient conversations are infinitely more powerful than shouting matches based on half-truths.
Which brings us to the challenge for you, the learner. If you want to be a better participant in whatever democracy, community, or, even family you live in, the challenge from the source text is simple but profound.
Very much so.
Before you form a rigid, unshakable opinion on a controversy, whether it's an international debate like the BJP and CJP, or a local zoning issue in your own town, force yourself to read from multiple, reliable sources.
Do not let the algorithm dictate your reality. That first post that pops up on your feed is almost certainly designed to trigger a fast, emotional response.
Yeah, it wants you angry or engaged immediately.
Exactly. It is specifically engineered to frame a wildly complex issue as though it is simple. Step back. Verify. Look for the nuance.
To bring this all together, we've covered some incredible ground today. We started with the conversational mechanics of spoken English, exploring how the phrase "as though" helps us navigate the present appearance of things. We learned how to say someone looks as though they are tired, acknowledging that we are observing cues, not stating medical facts.
Right. We moved into the unreal imaginary situations where the English language cleverly forces us to use the past tense to distance ourselves from a fake present reality.
Yes, the warning label.
Exactly. We talk about someone spending money as though they were rich, creating a psychological boundary between the illusion and the truth. And we saw how dangerous it is when social media removes that boundary, allowing us to consume viral clips as though they were the whole truth.
And then we applied all of this to a massive geopolitical stage, analyzing the competing narratives of protests in India. We saw how different groups can look at the exact same physical event and see totally different realities.
Yep.
And finally, we looked at the past tense, how people argue as though they had verified the facts to understand the root of political polarization. By understanding the linguistic mechanics of perception, we can actually start to navigate these debates without turning every disagreement into a toxic fight.
Which ultimately allows us to question those in power, to demand justice, and to expect peaceful public order, all while maintaining our civility and our grip on objective reality.
It really is all about recognizing the filters we are looking through and having the self-awareness to occasionally take those filters off. Well, before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over as you go about your day.
Yeah, think about your own inner monologue. We've spent this entire time talking about how we judge politicians, vast organizations, and the media landscape. But turn that lens inward.
Okay, I like where this is going.
When you make a mistake or when you fail at something, how do you frame that reality to yourself? Do you talk to yourself as though you are a finished product, completely incapable of change or growth?
Oh.
Right? Or do you talk to yourself as though you are a work in progress? If we can change the grammar of our own self-perception, opening ourselves up to nuance, patience, and grace, it might just change how gracefully we judge and debate with the rest of the world around us.